100 years ago, humanity, having uncovered the secrets of space, invented teleportation technology and opened a portal to unknown worlds, hoping for great discoveries. But behind the portal lurked not allies, but terrifying monsters whose nightmarish forms and ferocious power terrified the people. Humanity's weapons, from machine guns to tanks, proved powerless against these invulnerable creatures from another dimension. The portal, created with hope, has become an uncontrollable threat that cannot be closed, pushing humanity to the brink of extinction. One day, a soldier, in despair, swallowing the flesh of a defeated monster, unexpectedly made a discovery that changed the fate of humanity. His body began to mutate, acquiring unprecedented abilities, and thus humanity found the key to survival: adaptation through enemies. The only way to salvation is to hunt animals, devour their flesh, and absorb their souls, appropriating their power for evolution. A century of bloody battles and merging with the souls of beasts gave birth to a new humanity, whose strength grew with each hunt in this merciless world. Only continuous evolution and the hunt for monsters gave people a chance to survive in a world called the Refuge of the Gods, where survival became the highest law. The young warrior Han Sen rushed forward, saving his life, his heart beating in panic, because his strength, developed over a month, was still weak. His pursuers, armed with blades and fury, chased after him, and every step Han Sen took seemed like his last in this deadly game. Fate made him an outcast. Having stolen the souls of animals, he became a target for the locals, whose thirst for revenge was as great as their greed for power. Swinging his axe, he fought back desperately, knowing that the stolen soul of the beast was his only chance to survive in this cruel world. A dishonorable act? But in the refuge of the gods, where evolution and survival are the only laws, morality gives way to the instinct of self-preservation. It was all or nothing. If the pursuers caught up with Han Sen, their blades would mercilessly pierce him, leaving no chance for salvation. Gritting his teeth without looking back, he rushed forward, and drops of sweat like tears of fate flowed down his face, reflecting a furious desire for life. A month ago, he stepped into this refuge, which at first glance beckoned with its heavenly beauty, but concealed mysteries ready to destroy his hopes. On his 18th birthday, he was brought here, and looking at the shining beauty ahead, he dreamed that the whole world was as beautiful and serene. In reality, the refuge of the gods is a treacherous place full of dangers, and Han Sen ended up here against his will, becoming the breadwinner of the family after the death of his father. After finishing school, in his desperate situation, this refuge became one of the best but risky paths to a new life full of unknown challenges. As he watched the warrior walk proudly past, he noticed the armor of the spirit beast, whose mystical beauty ignited in him a burning desire to possess the same power. Suddenly he froze, feeling a sharp pain in his eye. A yellow glow began to appear after the fight with the monster. It tormented him, foreshadowing something ominous. This pain, like an invisible enemy, had been haunting Han Sen for a long time, depriving him of peace, and he was at a loss to guess what kind of curse was hidden in his body. As he turned the corner, he froze, seeing a huge white beast, like a wolf, whose fur glowed like stars in the shadow of the ancient walls of the shelter. The hero was amazed how this formidable monster, like a ghost, entered the city in broad daylight, disturbing the fragile peace of the sacred refuge. Enraged by the audacity of the monster that had sneaked into the city, the boy gripped the hilt of his blade tightly and, with a furious glare, rushed into battle, ready to crush the enemy. He rushed forward with lightning speed, pointing the sharp blade straight at the monster, hoping to interrupt its ominous tread through the streets with one blow. The dagger sank into the tough white fur on the beast's back, but surprisingly, it did no serious damage, only slightly scratching its impenetrable skin. Passers-by who noticed the fight froze in amazement, their eyes widening at the sight of the young man attacking the she-wolf. The beast shook from the impact, letting out a roar, and clouds of white smoke, intertwined with streams of magical light, swirled around it. Suddenly, the she-wolf turned into a beautiful girl, and the dagger, to the young man's horror, pierced her thigh, causing a cry of pain to echo across the square. Beads of sweat broke out on Han Sen's forehead, his teeth clenched in horror, as he realized that his fatal mistake had turned the battle into an irreparable tragedy. The outraged townspeople surrounded the young man, showering him with angry reproaches for daring to stab Qin Xuan, their beloved heroine, with a dagger. The first time he encountered such a transformation, the boy learned that the she-wolf was Qin Xuan, the most influential girl in the steel armor shelter. The people around, barely holding back their laughter at the absurdity of the situation, made fun of Qin Xuan, whose pride was wounded by the absurd blow to such a sensitive spot. The warrior was burning with rage, her eyes were burning with fire, and her voice was trembling with anger. How dare this insolent man touch her, offending her honor and dignity? An enraged crowd of men surrounded the offender, showering him with threats and curses, demanding retribution for insulting their goddess, whose fame thundered everywhere. One of the men, unable to contain his anger, kicked the young man hard, causing him to stagger in pain and humiliation in the face of an angry crowd of townspeople. The young man, unable to keep his balance, fell to his knees, feeling the crowd's gaze burning into him and shame and fear gripping his heart before the inevitable punishment. Kneeling before the girl, the newcomer listened to her angry speech, where every word hit like a whip, condemning him to eternal persecution in the shelter society. There was a blaze of despair in his eyes, mixed with a bitter sense of defeat, like a smoldering fire dying out under the onslaught of hopelessness. A crowd of angry men showered him with furious threats and harsh abuse, and at that moment he clearly realized that his days were numbered and hope was melting away like smoke in the wind. He clutched his head and screamed in agony, tears streaming down his face like a river, carrying his pain and fear into a bottomless pit of despair. Screaming in excruciating agony, he desperately tried to escape the nightmare, clinging to the fragile hope that it was just a dream that would melt away with the first rays of dawn. Leaving the bustling city and finding himself at a rocky mountain stream, he decided to let off some steam, allowing his anger and fatigue to dissolve in the cold spray of the stream. With furious rage, he dealt with the beetles, cursing fate and everything that had happened, as if every blow could erase his pain and bring back what was lost. The young man mercilessly gutted the black beetles one by one, tearing their flesh with grim determination, as if devouring the very essence of their existence. Having already destroyed the 30th beetle, the hero, looking at the data, realized with annoyance that the gene points were no longer growing, and his efforts were drowning in emptiness. Everything was happening agonizingly slowly for Han Sen, and he was tormented by the thought that at this rate, his dream of the first evolution would remain unattainable. He realized that the lower flesh of these creatures had little effect on evolution, like a grain of sand thrown into the bottomless ocean of his ambitions. The hero considered hunting more formidable monsters, but the bitter truth that his strength was insufficient shackled him like the chains of a past defeat. Remembering how he once challenged a stronger opponent, he almost died, unable to defeat even a weak Coppertooth, which still burned his soul. Having suffered severe wounds, he was able to return to life only after half a month, and this weakness still reminded him of the fragility of his existence. The young man began to think that it was time to look for allies for a joint hunt, because loneliness in this dangerous world threatened to become his death. Suddenly, a sharp pain pierced his eye, and he again felt that yellow glow, like a ghost from the past, awakening in him anxiety and hope. Waking up and looking around, he noticed a golden glow between the mountain slopes, alluring and mysterious, like the call of an unknown destiny. As he approached, he saw the glow intensify, bathing the mountains and surrounding area in a soft golden light that promised either salvation or a new threat. Before him appeared an alien beetle, unlike his previous enemies, with an unknown level of power, emitting an aura that made his heart beat faster. The hero gripped his blade tightly, keeping his eyes fixed on the mysterious beetle, whose golden aura seemed both alluring and deadly. The creature slowly crawled towards him, surrounded by radiance, like a living embodiment of light, hiding within itself an unknown power and mystery. The young man, like lightning, dashed across the distance to the enemy, causing the air to tremble with his decisive power. With a whistling sound, the blade plunged into the beetle's belly, easily tearing through its thick armor as if it were paper. Having examined the defeated enemy, the boy froze in amazement. The divine blood beetle promised the soul of the beast, capable of raising his strength to the heavens. Hansen's eyes widened. He couldn't believe it. Among the 4 classes, normal, primitive, mutant, and divine blood, such a beast was a legend. In the refuge, souls of divine blood are rare. They can be counted on the fingers, and the young warrior was eager to quickly uncover the secrets of this discovery. Realizing that the beetle's soul embodied the armor, the hero was struck by luck. His dream of power unexpectedly came true at this fateful moment. Activating the beetle's soul, the warrior watched in fascination as its glowing essence came to life, shooting upward in a bright spark. Descending from the heavens, the beetle's soul froze in the air, hypnotizing him with its mystical radiance before his eyes. A stream of golden energy enveloped the young man, penetrating every cell, filling his body with divine power, which made his heart beat faster. The armor, as if alive, smoothly enveloped the body, repeating every curve and forming an ideal protection, like a second skin. Liquid armor flowed, covering the warrior's head and shoulders, creating an indestructible suit of armor that glowed golden in the rays of light. Once the armor was fully formed, it covered all vulnerable spots, giving Hansen a feeling of unrivaled power and comfort. The light yet incredibly strong armor of the divine beast eclipsed the primitive armor of the shelter, striking the young man with its durability. Previously, he looked with envy at the magnificent armor of others, not daring to dream that he himself would acquire something so perfect. Burning with the desire to test his new power, the hero decided to immediately unleash his might on the rock to experience the divine armor in action. A crushing blow from his fist shattered the rock into pieces, and the stone fragments scattered as if obeying his will. The warrior struck blow after blow, shattering the rock into pieces, admiring the graceful power that flowed through his body like a river. Having acquired the armor of the divine beast, he felt euphoria. His life would now change forever, opening the way to great achievements. After many setbacks, a sudden stroke of luck lit a spark of hope in Hansen's eyes, promising a new stage in his heroic journey. Looking at the hearty soup made from the flesh of a divine beetle bubbling in a huge pot, the boy hid in the hope of getting the coveted evolution points from it. In his cramped room, he carefully placed a massive pot of fragrant brew on the fire, filling the air with a strange, almost mystical smell. The disgusting, bitter-tart taste of the soup made the cook sigh painfully, but he knew that it was necessary for his evolution. Looking over the statistics, the young warrior noted with delight that the beetle flesh had given him 7 evolution points, and the thick soup promised to increase his strength even more. Suddenly, Hansen remembered the mysterious item hidden in the beetle, which he had casually stuffed into his inside pocket, unaware of its hidden power. The tiny stone, emitting mystical energy, fascinated with its otherworldly glow, simultaneously enticing and inspiring an inexplicable fear. This mysterious sphere, shimmering with an unearthly light, seemed to be the heart of the beetle itself, as if it contained an ancient power beyond the control of the human mind. In the room where the cage with the experimental animal stood, the young man did not notice how the lizard reacted, sensing the power of the stone that he was squeezing in his trembling hand. In the blink of an eye, the beast snatched the sphere from the young man's palm, striking him with its unprecedented speed and agility, bordering on magic. Hansen turned around abruptly and cursed, angry at his own oversight that had allowed the lizard to so brazenly seize an artifact whose power remained a mystery. The huge lizard, having managed to catch the stone with its tongue, swallowed it, leaving its owner dumbfounded by its brazen act, full of primeval cunning. The warrior clutched the bars of the cage and showered the lizard with curses, but it, immersed in an ominous trance, did not react, as if the stone had taken possession of its mind. The beast's eyes went dark, and she froze as if life had left her, causing the young man to stand still, sensing the coming danger. The lizard's scales erupted in green flames, and it began to rapidly mutate, emitting a frightening energy that shook the air around the cage. Having grown to gigantic proportions, the lizard broke through the bars of the cage, turning into a formidable creature full of wild power. The mutated monster rushed at its master, sharp claws outstretched and fangs bared, ready to tear him to shreds with uncontrollable fury. With the agility of a seasoned warrior, the boy dodged the furious attack, instantly assessing the mortal threat posed by this newborn monster. He grabbed the blade with lightning speed and plunged it into the lizard's heart with surgical precision, stopping its onslaught of primal strength and fury. Before him lay not just a beast, but a gigantic green dragon, whose power and grandeur shocked the warrior, causing his heart to stop for a second. Stunned, he began frantically analyzing the data, trying to understand how the mysterious stone had caused such an incredible transformation in the beast. Delight overwhelmed him. The lizard, which had been a pitiful creature, under the influence of the stone, turned into a mighty dragon, opening the way to new horizons of power. Han Sen, his eyes blazing, plunged his sharp blade into the belly of the fallen beast, seeking to extract the shining crystal that promised unprecedented strength and power. Realizing that this mysterious stone was capable of elevating beings to the level of a god, the young man felt the key to a great destiny being born in his hands. Snatching the shimmering crystal from the monster's belly, the boy gently pressed it to his lips, realizing that he had found a treasure that would change his life forever. Leaving behind chaos and the torn body of the monster, the warrior, without looking back, left the kitchen where the bloody massacre was taking place, rushing towards a new goal. On the outskirts of the city, where the old house of the Sen family stood, relatives, blinded by greed, were engaged in a fierce dispute over the inheritance after the death of their father. Relatives surrounded Han Sen's mother and sister and furiously reproached them, arguing that a house full of memories should not belong to just one family. The fat uncle, puffing with indignation, insisted on dividing the inheritance, declaring that they had already lived in this house for 20 years and it was time to divide the property. The second man, with a greedy gleam in his eyes, nodded in agreement, hoping to snatch his share of the inheritance, which could provide him with a comfortable future. The aunt, smiling slyly, offered to split the cost of the house, demanding 3 million so that everyone would get 1 million, without caring about the fate of Han Sen's family. Lo Sulan, Han's mother, refused to sell the house with a heavy heart, because without it, her children would be left homeless, and her memories without a shelter. Fatty stubbornly stood his ground, declaring that they weren't the only ones in trouble, as he also had to feed his family and pay for his son's education, and his debts were weighing him down like a heavy stone. Raising his finger in a decisive gesture, he firmly declared that he would put an end to the dispute, threatening to take the debtors to court if they did not pay every last coin, and his eyes sparkled with unyielding determination. The sister and mother, with broken hearts, sat in mournful silence on the porch of the old house, and the young man, who arrived too late, painfully realized that he had not managed to protect them. The boy was seething with rage, shocked by the impudence of his relatives who, having forgotten how his father had saved them from debt, were now trying to take away their home, betraying their former gratitude. The father died in vain, having become embroiled in a fatal quarrel with a powerful celebrity group whose greedy demands for old debts became a fatal curse for the family. Little Han Yan and her mother, Luo Sulan, cried loudly outside the old house, tormented by grief, as her mother blamed herself for not being able to protect their home from greedy hands. The young man, holding back his anger, tried to calm his mother and sister, vowing that their home would remain inviolable since he had already secured the support of an experienced lawyer. The mother, with hope in her eyes, looked at her son, while tears rolled down her cheeks. She realized with trepidation that her boy had become a grown man, capable of protecting the family from troubles. The young warrior, consumed with anger, left, vowing to avenge the tears of his mother and sister, to restore justice and defend the honor of his family at any cost. The majestic building of the Star World Transport Station, in the Steel Armor's shelter, was striking with its multi-level complexes and a bridge across which a high-speed train raced. The giant hanging screen boomed with news. President Zhao Yalong had completed his third evolution, becoming a demigod, and had stepped into the fourth dimension of the god's shelter. The young man walked leisurely through the station, listening to the screens where experts predicted that the first person to reach the fifth refuge of the gods would be the one who had mastered the fourth evolution. Entering the express train carriage, the young man settled down by the window, lost in thought about the news that echoed in his head, foreshadowing change. As he raced on the train, he pondered how to use the stone to gain the power of evolutionists, although collecting 100 points of the divine gene seemed like an almost unattainable dream. Driving over the bridge above the houses, the young man dreamed of earning money, using every opportunity to save up for a cozy home for his family. Within the steel armor vault lay the Valley of Falling Winds, a place of tall trees, thick grass, and enchanting nature where the air rang with magic. Making his way through the tall grass of the valley, the hero longingly recalled the soup he had left at home, which could have been the key to his fame and fortune. Cursing himself for the undercooked soup, he imagined how this masterpiece could have brought him more gene points, mountains of money, and fame among the steel armor shelter. Suddenly, his keen gaze caught a movement from the thick grass. A living creature was lurking there, its outline barely discernible in the green sea of the valley. It was a wind mantis, a master of camouflage in the tall grass, but the warrior, whose observation was sharper than his blade, spotted it first. A giant insect and true predator, the praying mantis, whose scythe-like legs resemble the blades of a dangerous razor, and whose lightning speed makes it a deadly opponent. Having studied the enemy's habits, the hero realized that the praying mantis was a primitive creature, but its incredible speed and sharp limbs inflicted crushing blows. Like a wild panther, the young man rushed into battle. Burning with determination, he needed the blood of this monster to prove his strength, courage, and to gain gene points. But the mantis was quicker, spreading its wings and soaring above the warrior like a shadow ready to fall from the sky onto its victim. Looking up, the young man froze, amazed at the incredible speed with which the insect took off, preparing for a furious attack from above. The monster's eyes glowed a bright yellow, and it hung in the air for a moment, like death itself, preparing to strike the warrior with its scythe. The mantis's powerful blow landed directly on the young man's helmet, causing him to stagger, but the hero stood firm, gritting his teeth from the force of the attack. Taking a step back, he thought that he had gotten into a fight in vain. The mantis's speed was stunning, and its paws were a deadly threat. Checking the helmet with his hand, the guy was amazed. Even after the mantis's furious attack, the armor remained intact, without a single scratch or dent. Clutching the blade, the warrior pushed off the ground with renewed vigor and, like a whirlwind, rushed towards the enemy, burning with determination to crush the mantis. With lightning-fast grace, the young man sliced the mantis into pieces with one swift swing of his blade, feeling his speed surpass the limits granted by fate. Landing with cat-like agility and crouching, he realized that in this impenetrable armor he would ascend to the pinnacle of evolution, conquering nature itself. After the triumphant slaying of the first praying mantis, the skies darkened, and a whole flock of winged monsters burst forth from the clouds, ready to pounce on the daring warrior. Hansen stood as unwavering as a rock, as the mantis's deadly blows rained down on his armor, leaving not even a hint of a scratch. Realizing that even the mutated creatures could not defeat him, Hansen realized with cold confidence that he could destroy the entire flock in one fell swoop. With lightning-fast movements of his blades, he cut down the approaching mantises one after another, turning them into dust in the wind. The monsters attacked furiously, raining blows upon the warrior, but he, like a reaper, chopped off their paws, dancing through the whirlwind of battle with inexorable precision. The armor shone, reflecting the furious blows of the insects, while Hansen, moving with inhuman speed, destroyed enemies surrounded by a halo of death. The insects multiplied, creeping ever closer through the thick grass, their green bodies blending into it like ghosts ready to pounce from the shadows. Looking up, the hero saw a squadron of flying praying mantises above his head, their wings humming, heralding a new wave of furious attack on the warrior. Rapidly accelerating his movements, the guy vowed that he would send all these creatures to heaven. Having wandered into the mysterious Valley of Falling Winds, the man looked around in bewilderment, not understanding how fate had led him here. Still young and anxious, he felt the cold of loneliness in an unfamiliar valley, where every rustle concealed an unknown danger. Remembering his brave protector Qin Xuan, he thought fondly of how inspiring it was to serve under her wise command. Dreaming of tracking down the mutant in the Valley of the Winds, the boy hoped that this girl would generously reward him for his courage. Scratching the back of his head, he wondered in amazement where all the wind mantises had gone, and who could have so mercilessly cleared out this once teeming valley. Exploring the bloody battlefield, where the scarlet grass bore traces of carnage, the boy realized that an entire army of warriors had fought here, leaving chaos in their wake. There was so much blood that it had not yet had time to soak into the ground. The young man, looking around anxiously, realized that a fierce and merciless battle had unfolded here. His pupils dilated in horror. What he saw was so incredible that if someone had told him about it, he would have considered it the invention of a madman, and not the truth. On the mountain of fallen enemies, like a legendary samurai, stood a mighty warrior, whose power and glory seemed forged in the fire of great battles. The hero, standing proudly, absorbed the sweet aftertaste of triumph, his shining armor sparkling without a single scratch, reflecting the rays of the sun like a mirror. The traveler, shaking his head in shock, refused to believe that this was reality. How one man could defeat a horde of formidable enemies without being harmed. Hansen turned around with a sly smile and met the admiring gaze of the boy, who, holding his breath, asked if he really had crushed all the enemies single-handedly. The warrior, squinting slyly, offered the youth to buy some juicy praying mantis meat for 1,000 coins per carcass, since even a hero couldn't eat a mountain of prey alone. The young rich man from a noble family agreed to the deal without batting an eyelid, because his wallet, stuffed with money, allowed him to avoid counting the coins. With a mischievous glint in his eyes, the teenager promised to pay generously on top if the warrior could get him something else exotic and rare. With a wide smile, the young rich man casually handed the warrior a thick wad of bills, as if it were small change for a street vendor. The hero, having raked in the money, curiously asked the generous teenager for his name and address, wondering what else could be gained from this. The boy, introducing himself as Su Xiaoqiao, gave his address with a good-natured smile, completely trusting and anticipating new purchases. Han Sen, having received his payment without revealing his name or address, quickly walked away, dreaming only of how to earn more money. The young boy, enchanted by the mysterious aura and indomitable strength of the young warrior, in a fit of delight, shouted after him a question about his name. Swiftly moving away, the hero, unable to find a better answer, laughingly called himself Money Brother, leaving behind a trail of mystery. A foul breath emanated from the monster's mouth, with terrifyingly sharp fangs, dissolving in clouds of steam into the frosty air of the gloomy lair. The young warrior, having reached the lair of the copper-toothed wolves, was confronted with their ferocious grins, for these furious creatures fiercely defended their gloomy refuge. While Sen was coldly searching for the enemy's vulnerabilities, 3 copper-toothed wolves rushed to attack with a wild roar, jumping from the sheer rock ledges. Having honed his speed in battles with the praying mantises, the warrior, without wasting a moment, rushed into battle with fury, his blades flashing. His movements, like a flash of light, scattered enemies in a split second, leaving only chaos and fallen bodies in his wake. Having instantly cut down 3 copper-toothed wolves, the warrior watched as their severed limbs, as if in an ominous dance, simultaneously fell to the ground. In the previous battle, he impulsively exterminated all the mantises, forgetting about the treasured stone, but now he cunningly left one monster alive for the sake of his plan. By examining the fallen beasts, the warrior managed to obtain the soul of one of them, despite the beast's primitive nature, which became the key to his goal. The young man, ablaze with delight, his eyes glowing with curiosity, pondered the mysterious soul of the beast, recalling that in the fierce battle with the praying mantises, he had failed to capture a single one. The boy, holding his breath, extended his trembling hand, and the wolf's soul, bursting out of his body, rushed swiftly like a whirlwind to its new master, promising unprecedented power. The beast's soul, blazing with ancient power, was embodied in a weapon, and in the warrior's hands a huge spear flared up, engulfed in scarlet flame, ready to crush any enemy. The hero, with dexterity, performed a series of powerful lunges and swings with the flaming spear, admiring its speed and destructive force that tore through the air. With one crushing blow, the warrior cut down the centuries-old tree, admiring the perfect balance of the flaming spear that had become an extension of his will. A huge gate, 3 meters thick and higher than the treetops, majestically guarded the entrance to the steel armor sanctuary. A young man, walking slowly with a copper-toothed wolf tied behind his back, passed under the monumental arch of the gate when a detachment of formidable horsemen moved towards him. The crowd scattered in panic, making way for a detachment of horsemen, the faithful followers of the mysterious Son of God. Standing proudly to the side, Han Sen carefully counted the number of horsemen, realizing that they were heading out on an important and possibly dangerous sortie. The leader of the squad, called the Son of God and suitor of Qin Xuan, noticing the young man who had offended his beloved, abruptly stopped his powerful pet, drilling Han Sen with his gaze. Fixing his blazing gaze on the insolent offender, he quickly drew his whip and lashed the boy across the shoulder with furious force. With a cry that broke the silence, he angrily reproached the boy for his shameless insolence in daring to trade primitive creatures in this shelter. Han Sen clutched his wounded shoulder, from which scarlet blood was already oozing, and thought with disdain that this pompous dandy had clearly lost his mind. The onlookers gathered around whispered, recalling that terrible incident when this young man mistakenly stabbed their heroine, Qin Xuan. With menacing cries and furious threats, the suitor announced to the crowd that anyone who dared to trade with this guy would bitterly regret it when faced with his merciless vengeance. Having escaped with only a wound on his shoulder, the young man considered himself lucky because the detachment, hurrying about their business, did not finish him off in the heat of the moment. A passing horseman, Luo Tianyang, with an unkind grin, told the guy that if their paths crossed again, he would beat him half to death for his insolence. Seeing off his offenders with a heavy, hate-filled gaze, Han Sen was already hatching plans for revenge, realizing that to do this he only needed to gain strength with the help of the crystal. After spending 3 grueling days observing the copper-toothed wolf, the boy realized with disappointment that the beast's mutation was proceeding much more slowly than he had expected. The mutated copper-toothed beast's fur should have become as strong as metal, but the test subject's fur only changed color, leaving its strength unchanged, much to the disappointment. Packing a bag for snacks on the way, the young man, full of determination, cast aside thoughts of waiting and decided to go hunting for primordials to earn money. Suddenly, muffled voices were heard outside the door. Men were arguing heatedly about the impending battle, and their words, like sparks, ignited a burning curiosity in the young man. Burning with impatience, he pressed his face against the crack in the door to see what was happening on the landing, where the shadows of his interlocutors flickered in the dim light of the torches. Men whispered that 3 powerful clans had converged on the sunset slope, drawn by rumors of a beast of divine blood, and they themselves were preparing to rush there for glory. Without listening to the end, the young man, like lightning, jumped up from his place and rushed towards Sunset Mountain, driven by excitement and anticipation of a great hunt. The mountain, ablaze in the rays of the sunset, seemed to come alive under the sky, and the warrior, having climbed to its peak, longed to see the epic battle unfolding below. At the top, breathing heavily and dropping to one knee, the young man peered into the distance, hoping that he was not late for the start of the grand battle. At the foot of the mountain, clouds of smoke and dust swirled, illuminated by the agony of battle, where steel clanged and the cries of warriors merged with the roar of an enraged beast. Qin Xuan, dazzling in her anger, and her loyal comrades swiftly attacked from the left flank. The riders of the Son of God's squad, proudly sitting on their pets, drove the enemy into a trap with a deafening roar, shaking the earth with their mighty hooves. To the fiery cries of their leader, the warriors of the detachment, like a storm, rushed into battle, their hearts burning with determination. A mighty beast, like a centaur from ancient myths, swung a huge 2-handed axe, deftly maneuvering among enemies like a wild horse rushing across the endless steppe. With unstoppable power, he scattered his attackers with his crushing blows, and they, like weightless fluff, flew to the sides, unable to withstand his fury. It was a real massacre. The enemies, many times inferior in strength to the formidable beast, fell one after another, their desperate cries drowned out by the roar of the indomitable monster. Han Sen, standing at a safe distance, watched the battle with concern, his keen gaze assessing the incredible might of his opponent, whose strength seemed almost divine. The leader of the horsemen approached the beast with determination, but at that moment, the centaur's giant axe fell with terrifying force, threatening to cut through everything in its path. Barely having time to jump from the saddle, the rider grabbed the hilt of his sword in mid-flight. His movements were swift in the face of a mortal threat. Chin, seeing the attack of monstrous power, anxiously watched her lover, her gaze full of love and fear, betraying the storm of emotions raging in her heart. The pet didn't have time to dodge. The centaur's crushing blow cut him in half, leaving only the echo of his death roar that echoed across the battlefield. The squire, stunned by the loss, froze in horror. Just recently, he had been caring for his pet, but now anger and grief, mixed with a thirst for revenge, burned in his eyes. The veins on the leader's neck bulged from his furious cry, like ropes about to snap, and his eyes blazed with uncontrollable anger, reflecting the might of the divine power seething within him. Han Sen watched from his hiding place, holding his breath, amazed, as the divine blood gave birth to supernatural powers beyond the control of mere mortals. The beast's fury grew with every minute of the battle, like a raging fire, and it seemed that no force in the world could stop its destructive onslaught. Archers fired hundreds of magical arrows, glowing with spells, in the hope that at least one would find a weak spot and pierce the monster's impenetrable skin. Swinging his huge axe with furious speed, he crushed everything in his path. People, pets, obstacles, and no weapon could leave even a scratch on him. Han Sen, unable to look away, was amazed. This beast, blazing with indomitable power, was many times superior to the beetle he had defeated when he received the divine blood. The warriors, losing their last strength, could not hold back the enemy's onslaught. The centaur, like a hurricane, trampled them with his hooves, like bugs under the giant's feet, breaking the encirclement. The heroes of the Son of God squad, burning with courage, rushed into battle again and again, fearlessly attacking the monster, despite its terrifying power and inexorable fury. Like a living storm, the enemy rushed forward, tearing apart the ranks of defense. Sparks mixed with stones flew out from under his hooves, and the earth trembled under his steps. The leader, gathering all his will into a fist, summoned the divine soul, and at that moment time seemed to freeze, enveloping the world in mystical silence and anticipation of a miracle. A dazzling magical energy flared up in his hand, emitting a mysterious light and forming a weapon capable of crushing even a divine being. The soul of the poisonous, six-winged wasp of divine blood was embodied in the hands of the Son of God, taking the form of a giant arrow, blazing with unearthly power. The girl, holding her breath, looked at the young man with admiration and slight envy, because only a few in the shelter possessed such rare souls. The hero, drawing the string of his enormous ghostly bow, took aim with cold determination at the enemy, ready to crush him with one precise shot. The released arrow, with a crackling sound and sparks, like a lightning bolt, rushed after the centaur, cutting through the air with terrifying speed. At the moment of death, the centaur, as if sensing the inevitable, froze and cast a desperate glance at the arrow rushing towards him, carrying his fate. The arrow, like a red-hot blade, pierced the centaur like butter through a hot knife, tearing his chest apart, leaving behind only an echo of pain and destruction. The defeated centaur fell to the ground with a deafening roar, clinging in agony to the stone as if to the last thread of his elusive life. The young man looked with pride at his defeated enemy, mentally amazed at how he dared to challenge the Son of God. The battle-hardened warriors, shocked by the power of their leader, who had defeated the enemy with one crushing blow, looked at him with pride. Qin Xuan, looking at her hero in fascination, admired his inhuman strength, and her eyes shone with delight at his greatness and skill. With a slight mysterious smile, he met the gaze of the beautiful Qin Xuan, and something warm flashed in his eyes, hiding a storm of emotions. While the warriors, enchanted by the leader's feat, chatted in admiration, A blinding flash of light flashed towards the defeated enemy, leaving everyone in amazement. The centaur's divine soul was torn from his body in an instant by an unknown force, leaving only a devastated shell. The absorption of the divine beast's soul was completed successfully, and an invisible energy swirled around the mysterious warrior like a whirlwind. People, stunned by the spectacle and not understanding what had happened, looked in confusion as the flash of light quickly dispersed everyone. Han Sen, moving with elusive speed, merging with the surroundings like a ray of sunshine, received the soul of a divine beast and took possession of a huge centaur axe. Having stolen the soul, he quickly rushed away, leaving behind only a trail of light and the astonished glances of his competitors. Covering kilometers in a second, the fugitive raced across the endless plain and disappeared at the foot of the mountains, dissolving into the greenery of the trees. The warriors, their mouths open, froze in silent delight, amazed by the unprecedented speed of the hero, in whom the young Su Xiaoqiao recognized with trepidation the legendary Money Brother. Qin, the only girl among the stern warriors, watched the lightning-fast fugitive in amazement, wondering how her suitor would react to the audacity of this mysterious young man. He stood frozen in stunned amazement, amazed by the fugitive's brazen audacity, and the only question echoing in his head was who this mysterious Money Brother was. The young man, laughing, rushed forward, imagining untold riches, for he had acquired the second soul of the divine beast, thereby taking revenge on the Son of God, whose pride had fallen. Realizing what had happened, the leader, with a furious roar, sent his squad in pursuit, vowing to catch the audacious thief, whose impudence had ignited within him the flames of indomitable vengeance. Using ancient magic, he summoned a powerful pet, saddled his horse, and set off in pursuit, burning with a thirst for revenge for the daring theft that had defiled his honor. The huge, gray-maned horse, summoned by magic, blew steam menacingly from its nostrils, as if sharing its master's furious anger, its eyes blazing with determination to catch up with the fugitive. The leader of the squad, his face distorted with rage, loudly ordered the horsemen to rush in pursuit, to catch the insolent man at any cost, whose audacity had challenged their honor. As he ran, the boy felt the heavy support restricting his movements, realizing that he wouldn't be able to maintain his breakneck speed for long, and that soon the pursuit would overtake him like a storm. The troop of horsemen was already looming behind them, and Han Sen could hear their furious cries, demanding that he stop and accept the fate that was inexorably approaching with the clatter of hooves. The horsemen, shouting furious threats, quickly overtook the fugitive, and from the clatter of their charges, the heart of the young warrior beat in unison with the rhythm of the chase. Clutching an axe, the young man rushed through the forest, knowing that even 8 divine genes would not save him from the pursuit that was inexorably catching up, breathing down his neck. The leader of the squad, setting a frantic pace, shouted with caustic mockery how long this youth could run, eluding their blades. Reaching the limit of his strength, with beads of sweat running down his burning forehead, he clenched his teeth, realizing that the end was near and they would not ask him any questions. Resigned to his fate, he closed his eyes, remembering his mother, Luo Su Lan, and mentally asking for forgiveness for the daring risk that turned into a bitter defeat. Suddenly a voice flashed in his mind, daring him to believe that, panting with exhaustion, he was truly ready to stop and accept the inevitable end. The voice, like a war drum, thundered in his head, awakening childhood memories, and asked if he would really give in so easily, throwing up his hands before the enemy. It was my father's voice, clear and commanding, insisting that even in the most hopeless situation there was a way out if I had the courage to fight to the last. As a child, his father taught him a game where surrender meant defeat, and victory required killing enemies to advance to a new, more difficult level. The boy, trembling with fear, peered at the enemies surrounding him, assessing their strength and realizing that rushing into battle was a sure path to death. Father's words echoed in his heart. Danger was omnipresent, but he couldn't stand there trembling with fear. He had to act, even if hope seemed illusory. He was a passionate believer in genetic evolution, comparing it to an exciting adventure in which every living creature is tested. In the heat of the game, he accurately fired a smoke bomb from his bow, shrouding his enemies in a thick fog so he could slip unnoticed to his coveted target, using cunning as his best weapon. The released arrow emitted acrid clouds of gray smoke, blinding the enemies and creating the perfect moment for a lightning-fast maneuver to victory. Blinded by the acrid smoke, the wolves lost their bestial vigilance, and the father, relying on tactics, easily defeated them, proving that intelligence triumphs over strength. A well-chosen tactic became the key to triumph. Without armor or superpowers, he crushed formidable enemies, paving the way to his goal with cunning and courage. Remembering his father's lessons, Han Sen realized that without courage and risk, one cannot survive, and only the desire for self-development opens the path to true strength and success. In the game, he found himself at the bottom of the food chain, but his father taught him to become stronger in order to survive, tempering his spirit and body in the fight for his place in the sun. In those early years, the little boy had a vague understanding of what his father expected of him, and what deep secret lay hidden in his words, demanding courage and determination. Being smart, but still too young, he could not comprehend the hidden meaning of his father's instructions that was hidden between the lines of his wise words. Through the game, his father imparted to him the wisdom that in life you must become an unshakable pillar, relying only on your wit and strength to withstand the storms of fate. The father gripped his son's hand tightly and placed the hilt of the blade in it, forcing the little boy to freeze in anticipation of a new lesson, full of the harsh truth of life. Holding his son's trembling hand with the blade, the father suddenly plunged the sword into his chest, as if imprinting a lesson on the price of weakness and fortitude in the boy's heart. The moment the boy reached a new level in the game, his father's lesson was forever imprinted on his soul. Life does not forgive those who are not ready to fight to the end. The image of his father, frozen in his memory, inspired the young man. Focusing on his words, Han Sen realized that giving up was not an option, and it was time to take fate into his own hands. When he woke up, his eyes widened, a fire of hope blazed in them, and a plan was born in his mind on how to cheat death and survive. The enemies were already breathing down his neck, but gathering the last of his strength and blazing with hope, he rushed forward, ready to turn the tide of fate with one last action. Having caught up with the fugitive, the enemy let out a furious cry in which anger, determination, and the sweetness of revenge were mixed, echoing across the battlefield. The Son of God, frozen in mid-leap above his victim, swung for a fatal blow, but a desperate spark of salvation glimmered within the young man, promising an incredible turn of fate. With a burst of determination, the young warrior performed a fusion transformation with the stolen soul of the centaur, transforming into a blood-destroying beast. At a fateful moment, on the brink of death, Han Sen's soul merged with the spirit of the ancient beast in a blinding whirlwind, weaving their powers into a powerful harmony, giving birth to a transformation. Seeing the miraculous fusion of souls, the enemy froze in amazement, not believing his eyes. The young man accomplished the impossible, uniting with the soul on the brink of life and death. Han Sen's weapons, armor, and body were transformed by the fusion of souls, becoming more perfect, as if forged in a divine forge. The hero rejoiced, feeling a surge of new strength. It was as if he had been reborn in the body of a centaur. He felt invincible, ready to conquer any heights. Laughing to himself, the boy thought that this was only the beginning of the journey, because his new power concealed the potential to shake the heavens themselves. The horseman chasing him thought he was mad. Merging souls on the run was a risky venture, but in desperation the youth boldly challenged fate. The Son of God, who had fallen behind in the pursuit, looked angrily after the fugitive and ordered his henchmen to catch up and destroy the impudent one. In his centaur form, he raced effortlessly across the rocky terrain, using the strength of his new body to leave his pursuers far behind. The riders were ordered to destroy the centaur because he had ceased to be human and had become a dangerous creature that must be wiped off the face of the earth. One of the riders, looking at the steep cliffs, realized that it was almost impossible to catch the beast in its new form, because it had become a part of nature itself. Qin Xuan was angry and at the same time admired the bravery of the stranger, who not only absorbed the soul of the beast, but also stole the axe from under the nose of the Son of God. Discussing the moment when the Son of God wasted a disposable arrow and was left empty-handed, some were quite amused, because his pride already knew no bounds. Having made a halt, the squad heatedly discussed what had happened, and someone drunk suggested that the guy who stole the axe was called the Mysterious Bee. Reaching the deep forest lands, Han Sen, exhausted from the painful transformation, collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily under the starry sky. His gift of transformation lasted only 8 minutes. But fortunately, it was not the gods who were chasing him, otherwise even his shadow would not have escaped their pursuit. With his daring act, he insulted the honor of 3 powerful families, and now it is very dangerous for him to appear in the city with an axe. It must be hidden. The beast's soul cannot be sold, but the axe can be sold for 2 million. The young man, wondering who could buy such a weapon, dreamed of wealth. As the stars shone brightly in the night sky, he, tired but determined, reached the massive gates of the secret refuge hidden in the shadows of the forest. Rumors were spreading quickly in the shelter. Everyone already knew about the theft of the axe and were whispering, trying to guess who this mysterious bee was. The warriors scoured every corner looking for him, and if they had found the boy, he would not have lasted a minute under their furious blades. At the gate, the guard, preparing to search him, looked at the hero suspiciously, but he decided to temporarily forget about the axe, and no one would find the beast's soul. The guard stopped him with a sharp movement of his hand, warning him of a search, and his eyes showed distrust of the battered, empty-handed traveler. Taking one look at his shabby clothes, the guards decided that this poor man was not worth their time, because he clearly did not look like someone who had money. They dismissed him with contempt, telling him not to get underfoot, and set about the next ones with fervor, determined to find the thief. The young man, grinning slyly, since the guards had no idea or recognized him, confidently set off for the city, full of secrets and rumors. Word had already spread throughout the city about the mysterious Bai, who easily fooled the gods, causing both admiration and fear. As Han Sen passed by a lively group of people who were discussing what had happened, he caught a glimpse of the Son of God smashing his house to pieces in a rage. The young man was amused by how little Su Xiaoqiao, who had previously proudly called himself Money's brother, now called himself the brother of the cunning Bai. The majestic building where the detachment of the Son of God was located stood proudly in the center of the city. The influential Qin Xuan secretly invited Su Xiaoqiao to her secluded room, saving him from the torture that the Son of God's people were about to inflict. Sternly piercing the trembling boy with her gaze, Qin Xuan demanded with icy calm that he reveal all the secrets about the mysterious money brother without hiding the slightest detail. The youth, spreading his hands in confusion, swore that he knew nothing about it, that he had only bought a couple of dead creatures and shared them with his friends, begging them to believe his innocent eyes. Fortunately for the boy, Qin Xuan was not eager to punish him. She only coldly ordered him to convey a message to Money Brother that he wanted to buy an axe as sharp as her temper. The boy, beaming with relief at having escaped the wrath of the formidable warrior, promised with a broad smile to deliver her message, glad to be safe and sound. Deep in the night, in the mountains near a mirror lake, a young warrior surrounded by shadows stalked his prey, his path illuminated by the starry sky. As he devoured the succulent flesh of the green, scaly beast, he gloomily reflected that the city had already put a price on his head, but this only fueled his resolve. Studying his characteristics, the young man looked with annoyance at the 0 in the mutating gene, realizing that his strength was not yet capable of comparing with the legends. Suddenly, bubbles began to form in the dark waters of Lake Blackwater, and a seething whirlpool caught the warrior's eye, foreshadowing the emergence of an unknown threat from the depths. Slowly rising to the surface, the monster revealed its ugly, scaly head with yellow-green eyes, whose ominous lights pierced the darkness, causing the guy's heart to stop. Noticing the young man's gaze, the monster slowly sank back into the black waters of the lake, leaving only ripples and an oppressive silence on its surface. At that very moment, an ominous rustling sound came from the dark thickets near the lake. The hero prepared to meet a new threat lurking in the darkness of the forest. The sharp-eyed boy pierced the dense darkness of the forest, looking around warily, feeling how the night breeze carried with it mysterious whispers and distant rustles. He noticed a silhouette slowly emerging from the deep shadows between the twisted tree trunks, its outlines shimmering mysteriously in the moonlight. This mysterious stranger's clothes were all torn, as if he had survived a fierce battle with wild animals, leaving ragged traces of adventure and suffering on the fabric. Slowly, with the caution of a predator, the approaching one moved step by step through the dense bushes, where the leaves rustled under his feet and the shadows played hide-and-seek. The hero, without looking away, simply watched this ragamuffin with his keen, penetrating gaze, wondering to himself why he was so torn and exhausted. Finally, meeting their eyes in a tense silence, Hansen warned the ragged man not to go near the pond, as a crocodile was lurking there. The stranger, in his tattered clothes and with a hoarse voice, asked the hero what this wild, mysterious place was and where exactly the legendary sanctuary of glory was hidden. The hero, to his surprise, had not the slightest idea about the sanctuary that the stranger asked him about, and it soon became clear that the poor traveler was lost. This unknown young man, full of despair, bowed his head, and in his eyes, full of deep sadness and disappointment, the shadows of unfulfilled hopes were reflected. Looking into Hansen's eyes with unwavering determination, he demanded with authority that he be led to the legendary sanctuary of glory where the secrets of the ancients lay hidden. Sensing the cold harshness in the stranger's voice, Hansen frowned, shocked by the audacity of someone who dared to give him orders. Deciding not to waste his energy on the pathetic stranger, Hansen held back his anger and merely pointed the way south, where, according to rumors, the cherished goal awaited. As soon as the young warrior looked away, the treacherous stranger dealt him a vile blow to the back, which cracked his vertebrae and sent pain through the hero's entire body. The force of the blow sent Hansen crashing down, his head hitting the rock, and the world spun until blood gushed from the wound, covering his palm. Clutching his wound, blood oozing from between his fingers, an enraged Hansen cried out questioningly, his voice trembling with pain and rage. The stranger, clenching his fist, stood confidently, growling threateningly that the boy had better obey and take him to the sanctuary, or worse would come. Stunned by the stranger's strange behavior, the warrior quickly drew his weapon, preparing to fight back against this mysterious enemy. Confused by the stranger's audacity and actions, the young man assumed a fighting stance, his eyes burning with determination to defend his honor. Swinging his spear, he angrily warned the enemy not to force him to kill, his voice ringing like steel, ready for battle. The daring, ragged man grinned mockingly, his eyes flashing with a bold challenge, foreshadowing a furious, merciless fight where every blow would be like a clap of thunder. The enemy's hand burst into a blinding flame, and he scornfully remarked that the soul of the fallen beast was pitiful and unworthy of comparison with his indomitable power. With his bare hand, as if with a sharp blade, the enemy easily repelled the furious attack of the spear, demonstrating superhuman strength and lightning-fast reactions. The spearhead cracked, broke off from the shaft, and flashing fell onto the lush green grass, leaving the warrior speechless. Hansen froze in shock as his opponent cut the spear with his bare hands, using nuclear genomic technology that seemed to embody ancient power. Drawing power from ancient martial arts, this technique awakens the hidden potential of genes, releasing explosive energy comparable to nuclear fusion. The traveler, with cold mockery, offered the warrior a final choice, to resign himself and lead, or to meet death in an unequal but fierce battle. The enraged warrior, seething with anger, reproached the ragged man, saying that he, apparently in childhood, knew neither courtesy nor honor, but only wild, unbridled insolence. Activating the divine armor, the warrior rushed into the attack with a thunderous cry, vowing to send his companion straight to hell along a path of his own blood. The enemy, dodging the attack with cat-like agility, instantly lunged to the side, as if dancing on the brink of life and death with devilish grace. In the blink of an eye, the wily villain, with lightning-fast precision, delivered a crushing counterblow to the warrior's ankle, putting all his power into the blow, causing the air to tremble. A bright flash from the impact illuminated the surrounding area, momentarily revealing dark silhouettes casting ominous shadows on the ancient stones. A deep scratch remained on the divine armor, and, looking at it, the young warrior realized that before him was an opponent whose strength exceeded all expectations. With a mocking grin, the enemy declared that the youth had only withstood his ice muscle and jade bone technique, thanks to the divine armor, and demanded that he hand it over. The young man, burning with anger, was not going to give in and rushed into a swift attack, like a hawk ready to tear its prey to pieces in an instant. His speed was like a whirlwind, but the ragamuffin, with the agility of a predator, managed to block the blow, causing the air to ring with the clash of their forces. At that moment, the young warrior realized that he was trapped, and his heart sank with a premonition of impending disaster. The enemy, with a beast's fury, caught Han Sen by the leg in mid-flight and slammed him into the ground with terrifying force, causing the stones beneath him to crack like fragile glass. Scarlet blood gushed from the young man's mouth, staining the dust, and his pain-filled scream echoed throughout the forest, causing tremors in the invisible spirits. Having knocked the enemy to the ground and crushed him with his weight, the ragamuffin dealt furious blows, reproaching the young man for his weakness. Each furious blow pressed the boy's head into the cold stones, blood flowed in a scarlet stream through the cracks, and his consciousness trembled on the brink of darkness and hopeless despair. Suddenly, Han Sen transformed and delivered a crushing blow, sending his enemy flying, crushing his nose into a bloody pulp and causing him to stagger back in pain. A powerful blow knocked the breath out of the once self-confident man. His pride crumbled, and the world around him spun in a whirlwind of pain and confusion, destroying his former confidence. The young warrior stared at the enemy, his blazing gaze filled with only one inexorable truth: death, ready to devour everything in its path. In one blinding instant, the divine souls of the centaur and the beetle armor merged, giving birth to an unknown force that shook the very fabric of reality. The villain, stunned by what he saw, opened his mouth in a silent scream, and splashes of blood from his broken nose flew out like a scarlet storm, foreshadowing his end. Filled with the indomitable strength of a centaur, the young man rushed towards the enemy like lightning, ready to incinerate everything in its path. The terrified villain only managed to raise his hands, vainly trying to defend himself from the inexorable blow that fell upon him like the wrath of the gods. Han Sen's fists, like two red-hot sledgehammers, crushed the enemy's face into stone with a deafening crunch, turning it into a bloody mask of pain. The enemy, bleeding under a hail of merciless blows, wheezed out pleas for mercy, but his cries were drowned out by the roar of the warrior's inexorable rage. The young warrior, burning with righteous anger, knew no mercy, showering the enemy with blows, each of which was like a hammer forging the fate of the defeated one. Blood, like a scarlet flame, flew in huge drops in all directions, painting everything in an ominous pattern of battle, where life and death were intertwined in a furious dance. It was as if a builder had gone over the enemy's body with a jackhammer, leaving the defeated man lying in the dust, where the shadows of the past laughed at his broken hopes. Sitting down on the cold ground, the young man, still trembling, realized that his hands, stained with blood, had taken someone else's life in a merciless fight. Even in his strong armor, he received serious wounds, and if the soul of a wild beast had been burning within his enemy, the young man would hardly have survived this deadly duel. Exhausted, crawling on all fours towards the body of his fallen enemy, he was burning with the desire to study it, as if it were the key to unraveling their cruel fate. Searching the lifeless body, the young man rummaged through his pockets, hoping to find something useful that could serve as salvation, or at least a hint as to the meaning of this massacre. Under the torn shirt on the enemy's chest, he felt a tiny thing, cold and hard, as if it held secrets that could change everything. It was a tiny, glittering crystal, a memory chip, shimmering like a star and holding secrets that could change his entire world. Having reached the shelter and secluded himself in his room, the guy, exhausted by the battle, decided to make coffee in order to find at least a moment of peace in this chaos. As Han Sen examined the shimmering chip, he realized that this tiny crystal, worth a fortune, held secrets that could open the way to a new, unknown life. Placing the crystal into the data extraction machine, he held his breath, anticipating what secrets this tiny medium would reveal. When he realized what was there, his pupils narrowed in amazement. He froze, shocked by his find, realizing that this chip could change his fate forever. The chip contained a rare training program for the ice muscles and jade bone technique, promising unprecedented strength and mastery, accessible only to a select few. In the video stored on the chip, a graceful young woman demonstrated elegant yet deadly techniques with cold confidence, captivating with her technique and beauty. The young man rejoiced, realizing that luck had smiled upon him. The high-level nuclear technology he had discovered could elevate him to the pinnacle of mastery in a world full of dangers and rivals. After 3 days of grueling, sweat-soaked training, he mastered one of the techniques, feeling his body fill with a new, indomitable strength. Looking at his hand, Han-sen felt a coldness radiating from it, and his skin seemed to radiate mystical energy, confirming the power of the technique he had mastered. Even his body temperature dropped by 2 degrees to 35, and he realized that his physical essence had begun to transform under the influence of the ancient technique. Clenching the chip in his fist, he thought that storing this priceless artifact would be a serious problem, because it would be hunted. A sudden ringing of his mobile phone broke the silence of the night, making his heart stop. Who could be calling at such an hour, and what secrets did this unexpected contact hide? His relative, whose voice trembled with impatience, called the guy a psycho in a friendly manner and ordered him to come immediately. Han Huo and Shui Shi were already waiting for him. Listening carefully, the boy felt anxiety tightening in his chest, but curiosity got the better of him, and he asked where they were all going together. There was no answer, only a request to get ready and that someone would come for him soon. These words only increased his confusion, fueling his burning curiosity. Thoughtfully putting down the phone, the young man became lost in thought. Money Brother was still a mystery, and no one suspected who he really was. On the highway bridge, their car raced through the city, cutting through the air, as if in a hurry to reveal some sinister secret. The company was having fun, but Han-sen, lost in his thoughts, looked out the window until one of his friends jokingly called him Snowball, regretting his long absence. The friends laughed, remembering how B, having turned into a centaur, ran away from the chase, leaving his pursuers to swallow the dust raised by his hooves. But the young man thought with longing how he wanted to reveal to his friends who B really was, but the heavy secret shackled him like invisible chains. Arriving at the steel shelter, Han Ho, his cousin, put the family in a difficult situation, and this news only increased the young man's anxiety. The young man, not knowing where he was being taken, felt a vague discomfort, but curiosity, like a spark, pushed him to ask what awaited them at the end of this mysterious road. As they approached the majestic building, shining like a mirror in the rays of the crimson sunset, the driver grinned and announced that they were almost there. It was the legendary Starlight Martial Arts Stadium, whose emblem, the golden triangle, shone proudly as a symbol of unrivaled power and glory. A huge crowd was seething under the stadium's dome, filling the stands to capacity, their roar merging into a single rhythm, anticipating a great spectacle. Everyone, as one, chanted the name of Dong Jinryu. The young man thought that this man must be a real star whose fame thundered everywhere. He was the son of God who took his place in the first refuge, and his name, carved on the divine monument, became a legend sung by generations. In the center of the arena, surrounded by a crackling electric field, amidst scattered rocks, stood a warrior whose fiery aura burned so brightly that it obscured his body. Suddenly, the soul of the beast, bursting out of its body, rushed towards the dome of the stadium, shining like a comet and causing enthusiastic cries from the spectators. The boy, unable to look away, screamed with delight, confident that in front of him was the soul of the beast Dong Jinryu himself, whose power seemed unrivaled. As Han Huo watched the spectacle, he noticed that this soul was still inferior in strength to the blood exterminator B's soul, causing controversy among his friends. Han Sung's friend, nicknamed Psycho, vehemently objected, claiming that B had acquired his soul dishonestly by stealing it, and that it was unacceptable to compare him to the great Dong Jinryu. The young warrior grinned and thought that his crazy friend was, to some extent, right, but to reject such a generous gift of fate would be the height of stupidity. No one was supposed to suspect that the mysterious Bai, whose name was whispered in the shadows, was in fact he, the master of stealth and deception. His cozy apartment, hidden in a quiet area of an old 5-story building, held secrets that even his neighbors had no idea about. Looking closely at the captured copper-toothed beast, Hansen realized that the mutation had been complete within 15 days, transforming the creature into something terrifyingly perfect. Possessing the mutated beast, the warrior considered whether to consume its flesh for the gene, but the thirst for money proved stronger. Fixing his gaze on the copper-toothed wolf, the young man firmly decided that the time had come to contact the buyer who was thirsty for rare prey. With a slight smile, the warrior recalled Su Xiaoqiao, who generously paid in hard cash for the rare flesh of exotic animals. Late at night, under the shade of tall trees, the two met to make a deal in silence, hidden from prying eyes. Young Xiao, clutching a briefcase containing 2 million in cash, received dried copper-toothed wolf meat from the warrior, smelling of mystery and power. Confidently handing over the meat, the hunter assured Xiao with a grin that everything was fair, although a spark of cunning flashed in his eyes. Having received the meat, the young man, with a sincere smile, conveyed a message from Qin Xuan. She was eager to buy the axe and the soul of the divine beast. As the hunter walked away into the night, he nodded, but firmly stated that the woman must name her price if she wanted to continue doing business with a master like him. In the night sky, the stars flickered dimly, breaking through the thick fog that shrouded the treetops, as if hiding the secrets of the forest. Wandering through the forest, the warrior suddenly noticed a gap between the rocks, where at the bottom of a dark pit lurked a bottomless cave full of dangers. The deep cave was teeming with huge poisonous scorpions, but the warrior easily killed them, collecting a rich booty. Satisfied that he had killed almost all the scorpions, whose attacks his strong armor had easily repelled, he headed for the exit. Wandering through the dark cave, he barely made out a silhouette lurking near the wall, and froze when a familiar voice suddenly called out to him. The warrior shuddered at the unexpected shout, his eyes wide open, not believing that anyone could have found him in this gloomy cave. Warrior Qin Xuan turned to him with a smile and called him Money Brother, causing the warrior to freeze in amazement. The young man looked at the beautiful Qin Xuan in confusion, wondering how she ended up in this cave and what secrets brought her here. Deciding to ignore the warrior continued on his way, but her insistent cry with a plea to pull her out of the cave made him stop. Turning around in bewilderment, the young man asked if she really wanted him to carry her in his arms, since she couldn't offer any other way. The warrior clearly had a leg injury, and with no other options, she limped, unable to walk on her own through the dark cave. Sensing a catch, the young man mentally reassured himself that his divine armor would protect him from any threat, even from the treacherous warrior. Upon learning that Qin Xuan had been stung by a scorpion, the boy was surprised that she had survived, as the poison of such a beast should have killed her instantly. Calling upon the soul of the butterfly, she revealed that the scorpion had stung her while the dragon's power flowed through her veins, granting her protection. Summoning a butterfly soul dagger with a poisonous heart, the warrior warned the young man not to even think about taking advantage of her weakness. She added sternly that his vaunted armor would hardly withstand the blow of her divine blade, shining with deadly power. The young man raised his hand and asked the girl to calm down and put away her weapon, assuring her that he had not even thought of attacking, although doubts tormented him. He wondered to himself if Qin Xuan was reading his thoughts, because her words reflected the shadows of his own thoughts all too accurately. Blushing with shame, the warrior quietly added that she was ready to pay generously if the warrior would pull her out of the gloomy cave to a safe place. The young man, with a noble smile, refused the money, but remembered the scorpion she had mentioned, and his eyes lit up with curiosity. She wondered why he needed another scorpion, since he had already killed so many, but the warrior only smiled mysteriously in response. Looking into the hunter's stuffed bag, Qin Xuan gasped, amazed at the number of defeated scorpions piled up in a heap of prey. The warrior, with firm determination, declared that as payment he would take the soul of the mutant scorpion, whose power beckoned him with its mystery. Returning to the dead scorpion lying in a pool of blood, the young man carried out his plan without hesitation, absorbing its dark essence. Having emerged from the bottomless dungeon, they found themselves in a dense forest, where darkness hid their silhouettes. Through the dense treetops, the stars barely illuminated Han Sen, carrying the beautiful lady on his shoulders like a guard protecting a treasure. Holding tightly to the shoulders of her savior, the girl whispered that he should take her to the shelter, but not go in, fearing that they would be seen together. On the way, Qin Xuan recalled with disgust how the young man greedily devoured the scorpion without batting an eye, as if it was a familiar ritual for him. At the shelter, Han Sen carefully lowered the warrior to the ground, advising her to find someone who would help her, keeping their meeting a strict secret. Placing Qin on the ground, the young man firmly extended his hand, demanding the promised payment for saving her, his eyes burning with cold determination. As she handed over the soul, she remembered the little Su Xiaoqiao whom she had entrusted to deliver the message and asked if he had completed the task. Clenching the acquired soul in his fist, the warrior confirmed that the message had been received and named a price: 2 million for the axe and the soul of the mutated beast. Qin Xuan, with a sly smile, began the bargaining, declaring that the souls of mutated beasts outside the shelter were useless and offered only 1 million. Denezhny, after a slight hesitation, did not answer, promising that she would soon receive news from the boy about the place of the new meeting. Looking sternly after the departing warrior, Qin thought what a curmudgeon he really was, hiding her admiration for his tenacity. The young man entered the shelter at dawn, when the first rays of the sun pierced the dark clouds, illuminating his path with a weak light. With the precious load on his shoulder, he walked across the main square, looking around cautiously, as if sensing an invisible threat. Suddenly, the warrior noticed a familiar silhouette in the square, his cousin Han Ho, whose appearance promised both good fortune and a hidden threat. He glanced sharply at Han Sen, but when he received no answer, he frowned, clearly irritated by his cold indifference. The hero, deciding to pretend that he did not recognize his brother, stubbornly walked on, ignoring the shadow of the past that loomed behind him. Han Ho, not giving up, called out to his brother and rushed to catch up, his steps echoing across the morning square. Stopping, the young warrior turned around and, squinting, asked his brother what he wanted, hiding his curiosity and wariness behind his mask. Han Ho explained that he had heard about his skirmish with God's son and Qin Xuan and wanted to tell him something important. With growing curiosity, the young man looked at his brother, waiting for words that could change their shaky family ties. Han Ho admitted that he had recently arrived at the shelter, where his new life was just beginning, and begged his brother not to reveal their relationship because he did not want any problems. Han Sen reluctantly agreed, but he felt sad inside, thinking that he had never considered him a true brother anyway. A hint of resentment mixed with anger flashed in the young man's eyes, as if an old wound had opened under the gaze of a cold relative. Walking quickly away, he thought bitterly that his paths with his brother had never crossed in friendship, only in the shadow of indifference. Arriving home, Han Sen tremblingly laid out his loot on the table. 2 suitcases filled with money, gold, and jewels that sparkled like his future. Looking with delight at the mountain of money, the young man realized that his life was about to change, and decided to first take a walk with his mother and sister. Walking along the alley among the brightly colored shop windows and stores, they stopped at a restaurant that served legendary ice cream. Holding his sister's hand, the young man decided to make her dream come true by treating her to sapphire ice cream, sparkling like a star in her eyes. The girl, beaming with happiness, looked at her brother with love, exclaiming that he was the best, and her smile warmed his heart. His mother frowned and reminded him that ice cream was expensive, and they should save the money he had worked so hard to get. Reassuring his mother, the son confidently explained that his new mutations would allow him to earn more, opening the way to prosperity. He suggested going up to the second floor of the restaurant, where it was quieter, since there were too many noisy customers crowded in the hall. A guard stopped them, saying that the passage was closed, and Han Sen looked at him, puzzled, not understanding the reason for the ban. The man politely explained that the second floor was intended only for celebrities and aristocrats, inaccessible to ordinary guests. With annoyance in his eyes, Hansen repeated the guard's words, feeling humiliation burn in his heart like a hot coal. The mother, gently placing her hand on her son's shoulder, calmed him down, persuading him to simply buy ice cream for his sister and forget about the insult. The uneasy feeling still gnawed at Han Sen, and he clenched his fists and vowed to himself to become a celebrity so that no one would dare to humiliate him. High above the city, on massive columns, the overhead railway stood proudly, as if supporting the clouds themselves. In a crowded train carriage, a guy was clinging to a handrail and grumbling that this type of transport is always packed to capacity, like sardines in a can. Suddenly, there was a ringing sound. A train wheel jumped off the rail, and the carriage shook, causing horror among the passengers. Panic broke out in the cramped carriage. People were screaming, not understanding what was happening, and the young man was losing his balance in the crowd. He stumbled and clumsily collided head-on with the girl, instinctively grabbing her to keep from falling together. Accidentally touching the girl's cleavage with his hand, he froze, feeling how awkwardness gripped him like an icy grip. The young man's eyes widened, and he was stunned, a drop of sweat rolling down his cheek, revealing his embarrassment in front of the stranger. The girl, exploding with indignation, screamed, "Scoundrel!" and hit her offender in the jaw with her elbow, putting all her rage into the blow. Han Sen clutched his jaw and apologized desperately, explaining that the touch was an accident, but his words were drowned out by her anger. Meeting the stranger's gaze, he recognized Qin Xuan, whose face was flushed with rage when she realized who was in front of her. Stunned, not understanding how their paths had crossed again, he asked the girl what she was doing in this crowded carriage. Shocked by his luck, the loser thought that first the dagger, now the cleavage, such accidents cost him too much. Qin, glaring at him, mentally branded the young man a scoundrel, believing that his stupidity had given way to brazen insolence. The scene attracted curious glances, and some passengers whispered, certain that the young man had deliberately touched the girl's breast. Han Sen tried sincerely to explain that it was an accident caused by a slipping train wheel that caused him to lose his balance. But not believing a word, the warrior called him a repeat offender, because this was not the first time he accidentally touched her. Luckily, the train pulled into the station, interrupting the awkward altercation and saving the loser from further accusations from the angry beauty. As she left, Qin Xuan angrily warned Han Sen that next time she would send him to prison, her voice ringing with a cold threat. On the platform at the train stop, the soldiers stood at attention and greeted Qin Xuan as the station's mistress and mistress. Upon learning that this girl was in command of the garrison, the hero was amazed, realizing that he could be being watched because of her influence. Clutching his head, he bitterly cursed his bad luck, feeling how fate was tripping him up again. As he walked down the street, he frantically thought about how to avoid meeting Qin without revealing his secret identity. Suddenly, a rude shout came from behind him. Someone called him an idiot and ordered him to come closer. The voice sounded with obvious mockery. One of the soldiers, smirking, demanded that the guy come over, stating that he had questions for the suspicious young man. Waving his hand with a forced smile, Han Sen said he didn't want to waste the busy soldier's time, hoping to avoid trouble. The soldier, clapping him on the shoulder, firmly stated that his opinion did not matter to anyone, and that it was an order, not a request. The bright sun flooded the dense forest on the mountain slope, casting long shadows from the trees, which seemed to warn the young man of impending danger. The foot squad ran at a light jog along the path between the trees, their footsteps echoing in the silence of the forest, full of hidden threats. The warriors, beaming with joy, rejoiced at the success of the hunt, as they had managed to catch many outlandish creatures for their master. 3 days after leaving the shelter, Han Sen was angry that the soldiers dragged him along on a hunt without asking his consent. At the edge of the cliff where the road ended, the young man wondered why the Son of God needed these low-level creatures, tormented by doubts that this was simply a trap. The cliff offered a view of an endless expanse of land and a gigantic bottomless abyss, like a gaping wound in the earth. Looking into the abyss, the Son of God solemnly announced that they had reached their goal, and his voice sounded like the rumble of fate. The platoon commander pointed to one of the soldiers, ordering him to go on reconnaissance, and looked firmly at the others, expecting obedience. Having given the boy a slap on the back of the head, the commander admonished him not to let the squad down, sending the young man after the scout into the unknown. Bent over from the blow, the young warrior gloomily wondered if they would simply be thrown into a dark dungeon in the middle of a wild forest with no chance of return. Upon returning, the scouts led the detachment into a gloomy cave, where torches cast flickering reflections, illuminating the path into the darkness. As they delved deeper into the depths of the cave, the warriors peered vigilantly into the darkness, prepared for any threat lurking in the gloom. The commander, fearless, lit a glowing saber, urging the squad to hurry in order to quickly get the promised money. Descending into a spacious grotto, the warriors saw an underground river, whose waters flowed at the exit of a tunnel hidden in darkness. Bright torches reflected off the rocks, illuminating the space around and giving the cave a mysterious, almost magical glow. The river's current seemed fast, but its waters were surprisingly calm, as if they concealed an unknown force beneath them. One of the warriors reported to Commander Ryu that the tunnel had ended, pointing to the river as the only way forward. The commander grinned and pulled out tiny boats from his pocket, which, upon touching the water, miraculously grew in size. The warriors, amazed, admired this magical invention, which made the crossing convenient and fast, like a gift from the gods. Han Sen, watching in confusion, realized that the squad had prepared thoroughly because a new tunnel was visible on the other side of the river. Part of the squad divided into inflatable boats, several people in each, and began crossing the dark waters.